In the 50 years since the experiment, no one had done as extensive research as you.
Yes. It started as a side project. I used to do found footage films. And I discovered the Stanford Prison Experiment. I'd heard about it, but I've never really digged into it. I decided to fund a trip to Stanford to go through the archive because I wanted to build a film from the archive. I thought it was fascinating to investigate this. The narrative is very striking. It's really a story about good and evil, about these innocent young students behaving like tough guards just because they were given power in the situation. It plays on the inner fears of people that there's a monster inside of all of us. Maybe all men are potential rapists. Maybe we are all potential Nazi.
The monster isn't out there. It's in you.
The Stanford Prison Experiment became rapidly famous.
The famed Stanford Prison Experiment.
Are you aware of the Stanford Prison Experiment?
Dr. Z, this is a high nerd moment for me. I know all of your work very well.
My legacy is to make psychology appetizing to the general public.
You have a rock band called the Stanford Prison Experiment. You have series talking about it. And you have feature films, a German one, an American one.
It's important to get it right, but for me, it's equally important to make it interesting.
It was in many books about group violence, World War II, obesity. It was taught in colleges everywhere in the US.
I'm Dr. Zimbardo. We're recreating the Stanford Prison Experiment.
Let's go, prison.
I have 6 participants involved in something I call the Stanford Prison Experiment.
Hi, my name is
Zimbardo.
It has become more of a pop culture item than a scientific item.
I want to reach the world.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Professor Phil Zimbardo.
Zimbardo says that the Stanford Prison Experiment explains how millions of people could agree with mass murdering.
In Rwanda, people killed 800,000 of their neighbors. That's the power of the situation.
He has a very simple explanation to this very complex world events.
Maybe it was a bad barrel that corrupted them.
You really feel like you understand human nature after you've learned about the Stanford Prison Experiment. Zimbardo became worldwide famous from this and other topics.
Philip Zimbardo.
Dr. Zimbardo.
Philip Zimbardo.
Phil Zimbardo.
Phil Zimbardo.
Dr. Zimbardo.
Philip
Zimbardo.
Yes, Philip Zimbardo.
But after going through the archive, I started to realize that the official narrative was a lie.
I hope that the message gets carried to the public.
It just did.
What do people think it proves, or what does Zimbardo say it proves?
Well, the popular narrative for this thing, as you probably know, is that you take these normal people and you put them in this evil environment and suddenly they become evil. But, I don't think you can draw conclusions from it because of the way that it was done and the effect that he had in tipping the scale, so to speak.
Zimbardo had a perspective he wanted to advance when he did the experiment, that the guards did do evil things and the prisoners did become more passive than they might otherwise, but it's not the whole story.
If you want to have an experiment where everyone's the same, you should use fruit flies.
We all behave because we have reasons to behave the way that we do. It's very good theater, but I don't think it qualifies as good science.
At Stanford, in the archive, you had pretty much everything that was recorded during the experiment. You had the forms that the prisoners and the guard had to fill, reports that the guards had to write every day, a lot of press. There was about 6 hours of films and 15 hours of audio material. For the next 2 weeks, I sat every morning at the library and went through these boxes. I also went through all the articles and books written by Zimbardo. I discovered in the archive elements that I found shocking.
Can you walk me through what happened on day 1?
It depends on what you call day 1. I found in the archive that there was a whole training day for the guards. And Zimbardo talked about this training day in his articles and in his books, but he's saying that it's just to restrain them from using violence, for instance.
Were they given guidelines at all?
They were given very simple guidelines. If the prisoners escape, the study is over, maintain law and order, but no physical abuse. Essentially, they were giving no training in how to be a guard.
Actually, in the archives, you can see that it was a real training session.
We got these clubs. They'll have no privacy. We have total power in the situation. It's totally controlled by us. Totally controlled by us.
And the discovery of Ken Carter was another red flag.
I'm the guy that you never heard about that you should be hearing about, because I am the guy that quit.
Why is it important to know about you?
Well, not everybody participated. I would think there would be, that should have come up at some point. I was born in the Midwest and came to California as soon as I could. California was a place to be. Everybody was doing drugs and smoking pot, and so I came out to move to Palo Alto. I did odd jobs, handyman stuff, and I was doing experiments at Stanford. In fact, I don't really remember any of them. I just remember making the money, and that was a good thing, other than the prison experiment. I signed up for this experiment and walked in to this room and found out that I'd been chosen as a guard. They had all the guards come to this meeting to explain what they were doing in the experiment.
Essentially, we're setting up a physical prison here to study what that does. And there'll be constant surveillance. Nothing they do will go unobserved. We can create boredom, we can create a sense of frustration, we can create a sense of fear in them. They'll have no privacy at all.
My feeling about Zimbardo was distrust and suspicion. There was something about the way that he conducted himself in the meeting.
But to take away their individuality in various ways. In general, what all this leads to is a sense of powerlessness. That is, we have total power in the situation, and they have none.
To me, it seemed like the whole thing, we were being pushed in a direction. That's why we were there, to do what they expected. It sort of escalated, you know, it was like guys are really getting into it. You could do this and, you know, you can control them like that. And it was hard for me to listen to it, but also I felt more and more isolated from that group. I just decided I wasn't going to participate in it. So I started thinking right then, how do I bail out of this? Right after the meeting, I went into his office and I told him I just couldn't see myself doing this. I had a real problem with what the guards were saying. His initial reaction to me was, well, why don't you stay then? Why don't you stay and redirect this? And I said, I don't think it can be redirected. I felt like this was set up for the guards to abuse, so how could it go any other way?
Zimbardo wanted people to believe that the participants were spontaneously responding to the situation, whereas the case of Ken Carter showed that even before starting the experiment, the participant could really easily guess what Zimbardo wanted to prove. What's also a red flag is that Zimbardo always pretended that the guards made up their own rules.
First thing the guards said is, we need rules. And so they set about to make up this systematic number of rules.
The guards made the rules.
Oh, absolutely.
Not you.
Oh, no, not at all.
But in the archive, I discovered a lot of evidence showing that the guards were given the rules that they were to enforce. They knew what punishment they could impose to prisoners. And in their own reports, they wrote at the end of each day, schedule followed pretty closely, punishment. They were following a script. They were not reacting spontaneously to the situation.
Oh, this is all spontaneous. The only thing we told the guards were, we want to maintain a prison here for a week, do whatever you have to maintain law and order.
After all of these instructions, I felt that we were all on the same page with what we wanted to see come out of this, and that was proof that prisons are an evil environment. Given the times and given the fact we were students and very anti-establishment, we would have done anything to prove that this prison system was an evil institution. We were happy to play that role.
Test 1, 2.
Okay, when you do your mic cable, if you bring it down round here, come round to the left. Can you do that? My stage name is Nigel. This is Nigel and Clive and the British Invasion. Come to my dressing room, and here I must leave you. Oh, really, really nice there. The hair's growing out a bit. Covers the bald spot, doesn't it? Which ones do you prefer? You like these here? Or these? These are a bit smaller, aren't they? You're a star. Go out and knock 'em dead. Let's do some music. 1, 2, 3. In high school, I got very much into theater. I was in every play, every musical, the choir, and then I decided I wanted to be an actor. My acting teacher always said, do not break character. And that is the goal. Are you wearing your hearing aid? The way that I was portrayed in the experiment by Zimbardo was that I step into this evil environment and suddenly I become this evil character, when in fact, before I step into the experiment, I stay outside and I get in character, and when I'm ready, I enter and now I am my character.
Now do it fast and do it loud and sing it. Start with you, 10:37. 1, 2, 3, 4, contact.
You see how quickly the good boys become brutal guards.
We can do this. What would it be over here?
It's like it never occurred to them, like they'd never been to improv class.
4325, get out here and do 10 push-ups. Now you're just too slow. 1, 2, 3.
So I decided I would become Strother Martin from Cool Hand Luke. He said, you know, man, I can be a nice guy.
Oh, I can be one real mean son of a bitch.
I would bang my nightstick against my hand. I would say, I'm gonna hit you so hard, it's gonna kill your whole family. And I kept a straight face.
Then what the hell are you talking about?
He was pretty convincing.
I'm sick of you, 293.
What we have here is a failure to communicate. Prisoners thought it was hilarious.
You don't want to eat 2 stinking sausages? You want us to take them and cram them up your ass?
I never broke character. That would have destroyed the whole effect that I was going for. I like to stir it up. You know, I was kind of a jerk in that way, frankly.
He was creative in his evil. He would think up very ingenious ways to degrade, to demean the prisoners.
Keep it straight.
A lot of the behaviors that appeared in the experiment, maybe given a couple of months, you would have seen the same thing happen. I just made them happen in a couple of days. I was very sympathetic to what I thought their goals were, and that was to prove that prison was a lousy place.
Turn around, push-ups.
And I may have made an impact on, you know, the understanding of human nature with my acting job.
Thank you, 416. Over there. Oh, that's perfect.
Not all the guards became sadists, only some did. Phil makes it into like everybody became a sadist.
He became a sadist. Guards behaved sadistically. And what it brought out was the worst. Cruel, sadistic, dominating. Going way beyond the rules that they had set.
You had different feelings toward different guards. Some of you were worse than the others. You're all but you were really bad. You're a medium. Some were really, really deeply into their.
These good guards were totally into the role of being sadistic, controlling, dominant.
They're different people, but Phil doesn't think they're different.
Professor Zimbardo truly believes that there is an evil that lurks in every human. He was using this experiment to make his point. He said it's part of human nature. It wasn't even true of the 9 guards. I didn't like being a guard at all. I had a lot of compassion for the prisoners. When I had been at Stanford in France, I was smoking pot every day. We smoked openly on the campus. My first quarter, I took Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism, Jewish mysticism, and Chinese art, but I also just absorbed what I could absorb. I'd had very close encounters with getting arrested for hash, so when I saw this prison experiment, it just really felt like it could be a way to have a cathartic experience of what it would have been like had I been incarcerated. When I was a guard, I thought pretty much every day about giving some joints to the prisoners. I wanted to be one of them.
3, 4, too slow. 5.
One day, the warden, who was a graduate student of Professor Zimbardo, took me aside, and he said that they had noticed that I wasn't acting tough.
Okay. We noticed this morning you weren't really, lending in, and I was wondering if there's anything wrong.
They thought I was kind of laying back and kind of letting others take the lead, and I was pretty neutral, all of which was true.
Yeah, well, you have to kind of try and get it in you.
He kind of gave me a pep talk about how I needed to help out my fellow guards and how to help out the experiment.
We really want to get you active and involved because the guards have to know that every guard is going to be what we call a tough guard.
They did try and interfere with the way the experiment was going, and they tried to mold it to their expectations.
The idea is that we want to be able to study what a prison is like. We want to see what this does to ordinary, innocent people. And we know it's not nice.
They could say whatever they wanted to say, but I wasn't going to change anything.
Real scientific experiment, you would not intervene to produce the results you want. When you can see the experimenters really putting their hands into the material that they're supposed just to watch. This is bad scientific methodology. Unfortunately, when you produce science just in order to make something striking, that's when you're on a slippery slope. With his team, Zimbardo was not behaving as a scientist. He was behaving as someone who really wanted to shock the world. What's more is that the ethical dimension of the experiment wasn't questioned at all. You have the feeling that the prisoners could get out at any moment, and which was not true. Actually, the participants that signed the document saying that they could only get out with the authorization of Zimbardo. One prisoner, Duke Corby, is trying to rebel and get out, and Zimbardo tells him he cannot leave.
Zimbardo told me that I couldn't get out of the experiment with the tummy ache. All I'm thinking is, this is for real. These people don't want to let me out. And I'm pissed off.
Like, if I gotta be in here, I'm not gonna put up with it. 8612, I think you gotta spend a little time in the hole. A good place to get to know well.
They threw me in the hole. I was in this closet on my side, lying down in this dark. And I remember being really like, oh, I can't get out of this experiment. Somebody had control over my life. I'm in this emotional state. And then I got desperate. I had to be creative. And that's when I decided I had to act like I was crazy. I thought, well, there's 3 things you need to do. You need to be agitated in your body, you need to be screaming, and you needed to generate tears.
I want out! I want out! I want out!
All I was thinking was, keep this up, try not to give in too quickly to saying, oh, I'm faking it to get out. You don't just sit and be upset, you have to act upset. I was acting agitated, and it's a lot of work, somehow traumatizing to rev yourself up into that mental state. It was yucky.
In 36 hours, the first prisoner had an emotional breakdown.
If you listen to the tape of the mental breakdown, It does sound a little suspect, I'll be honest.
I'm burning up inside, don't you know, man? This door's unlocked. So if I touch this, it doesn't lock. Does it?
No, I don't think it does. No. Just, yeah.
So I should hit this one.
Starting on, he says at some point I was lying down. So just at some point you're lying down.
You want me to just start laying down?
Yeah,
Okay.
Wait, if there's any action, we'll just walk out. But
Okay, sounds great.
yeah.
Zimbardo explained that he had a lot of material, but actually he recorded only 6 hours of over 150 hours of experiment. He recorded mostly the spectacular, the most violent parts of the experiments. It's also the way Zimbardo wanted it to happen.
One of the things that most interested me about this experiment is that what you have is people who are being asked to play the roles of guards and prisoners in a simulated setting.
This is cell 2, and this is cell 3. This is the solitary confinement.
And this basically immediately is comparable to any number of improvisation exercises that happen in acting workshops.
See where we want to have.
Which is a bit like saying, is there a difference between experiment and experience, which are almost the same word? In French, they are the same word, expérience. And what really interests me about these behavioral experiments is that the way they get written about by the scientists is always from this completely objective, distant perspective. The subjects behaved in this manner, as if they're rats in a maze. Nobody's actually asking the rats what they think is happening, because that's not how scientists do it.
This is all B-roll.
How do you think the experiment has affected Doug over the years?
He gets some gratification out of being able to tell his side of the story, because his side of the story is quite different from Zimbardo's side of the story. And if Zimbardo had his way, no one would say anything but what Zimbardo proposes. It gives you some power over what was a terribly disempowered situation. The fact that one of the prisoners had a mental breakdown because of the treatment of the guards, it gave the whole experiment a huge pop. You know, it was like, oh, look, even after 5 hours of very mild oppression, we can cause mental breakdowns in people. Well,
why didn't he understand I was just trying to get out of a bad job?
Because he didn't want to. That didn't fit his narrative. His girlfriend at the time said, this is out of control. And he goes, oh, yeah, okay. You mean I can't have them kill each other? No, you can't. So that's when he finally, but I think up till that moment, he was in heaven.
Yeah, he really was.
What is your understanding as to why the experiment ended early?
What I've been told was that Christina Maslach, after witnessing my supposed magical transformation from normal kid to sadistic bastard, that she went to Philip and demanded that he stop torturing these boys and call an end to the experiment.
Probably there was good reason to shut it down, not to mention that his girlfriend chastised him for doing this. That made a good headline.
I just began to feel sick to my stomach. I had this just chilling, sickening feeling of watching this, and I just turned away.
Down, up, down.
She came down, saw that madhouse, and said, you know what? It's terrible what you're doing to those boys, and you are responsible. And I ended the study the next day. The good news is I married her the next year.
The woman with fresh eyes saw the inhumanity and woke him up. God. Wonder if he scripted that too.
It wasn't until 15 years after the experiment that Zimbardo created this narrative saying that Christina made the experiment stop. He wanted drama and a Hollywood ending.
At first, Zimbardo had implied that this had gone overboard, so we reined it in. It was clear that this was not a structure built to last. It was built to stay hanging there for long enough to get certain kinds of images of behavior. That was its purpose. He now had a lot of material, a lot of video, a lot of audio, and he might just have gone, this is good.
The very first version of the story that he tried to tell was the version that says prisoners are badly affected by prison conditions. Look what happened to our prisoners inside a week. And there's a truth to that, but it didn't sell because a lot of people turned around and said, why did you do that to those kids? And so, almost immediately, you get the Attica uprising, the bloodiest prison riot in American history, which happened the month after the Stanford experiment.
9 hostages and 28 convicts were killed, perhaps 100 convicts injured, as the authorities moved in with force to bring an end to a revolt which started last Thursday.
I don't think we would be talking about this now if not for Attica, which made prison this enormous thing in the popular culture. We want to know why the guards and the state troopers have gone in there with shotguns and tear gas and killed that many prisoners. What could be going on there?
What about the thousands of prisoners who die all over the country?
Zimbardo realized that it's a much better way to spin the story if you look at what the guards did, so let's tell the story that way.
Guards have total power, getting away with murder, evil of prisons.
This is what Zimbardo's brilliant at, is finding an angle in order to get people to talk about the thing underneath it that matters.
We wanted to ask the question, what happens if you take people, all of whom are good, and put them in a bad place? Does the goodness of people dominate the bad place, or does the bad situation come to corrupt the good people? And the sad answer was the latter.
I did not believe that we were part of the experimental subjects. I believed we were helping implement the experiment.
You know, they never said anything about that they're studying us too. That doesn't excuse lots of my behavior, but it's a backdrop for some of my behavior.
If it was made clear to us that we're there to be studied, not to help study prisoners, we would have acted completely differently.
In the archive, several guards say they've been shocked to discover that they were a subject in the experiment. Zimbardo, he pretended that they were not observed. And the guards, they thought they were part of the experimenters. They were not part of the subject, which is a lie. And they thought they were like theater actors, and the experiment was not about their behavior, it was about the prisoners' reactions. But they were part of the experiment too. He had this agenda. Let's make something very striking, very graphic, very extreme. Let's go to the media with this argument. The Stanford Prison Experiment was like a media event. It was not planned really as a scientific experiment, but it was more like producing material that could be used by the journalists. The media was a central character in the aftermath of the Stanford experiment. Right after the end of the experiment, Zimbardo was invited on KRON TV, which was a local station in San Francisco, and there he met a TV producer, Larry Goldstein. He had the idea of doing a piece on the experiment. Zimbardo is telling him that there have been ups and downs, but what Larry Goldstein would like to show is a situation building up, the violence growing and growing, and so he's pushing Zimbardo to change his narrative and to have a narrative which is more linear.
What you've got to stress is each day as we progress, you've got to emphasize that the way the experiment has progressed so that behavioral patterns are beginning to emerge and intensify. So by the second day, this happened.
On day 2, the prisoners rebelled.
By the third day, such and such happened.
By day 3, the guards were exerting control over every aspect of the prisoner's life.
By the fourth day, now we're at this level, etc. Okay. Well, I love this story.
Only 4 days had passed, and the guard's sense of moral value had been totally altered. Things had gotten so bad that we no longer had a group of prisoners. What we had were
individuals struggling for survival.
He's streamlining the story, and that's how, in November, he screened the piece on the Stanford Prison Experiment. It gave a national publicity to the experiment.
Some of this video is just really compelling. It has the feel of pornography without really going there, and it has a moral justification for why you're watching this thing. And that kind of combination becomes one of the ancestors of reality TV.
This was unscripted, free-flowing, it was creative. It was a great idea, and he knew it would get press.
This particular experiment really made a name for him, and I think that he basks in the limelight. He really built his career on this.
Zimbardo, for years and years, told this story to the media.
Please welcome Dr. Philip Zimbardo.
The guards then began to escalate their use of power.
Brutal, sadistic, some of them creatively sadistic.
They were often here with no clothes on. You can't see someone's eyes. This prison is about to erupt.
He's a genius at figuring out what will attract media attention.
In this demonstration, we want to see whether ordinary people blindly obey someone who seems like an authority when he asks them to do something potentially dangerous. What just happened?
What makes good people do bad things?
You've been at this a while.
I've been creating evil for a long time.
Welcome back, everyone. Right now on MSNBC, charges of abuse of Iraqi prisoners.
These powerful images lie at the heart of the prisoner abuse scandal. Naked Iraqis forced to create a human pyramid while U.S. soldiers look on grinning.
The pictures were leaked to the press and first revealed to the world in May of 2004.
Many of us are just trying to figure out what happened to make apparently normal soldiers to do the things depicted in the pictures.
You might wonder what kind of person could participate in those situations.
When the news came out about the Abu Ghraib prison, Zimbardo implied that Abu Ghraib was the replication of his experiment.
I had seen those images 35 years ago. My good guards did that in our mock prison the same way these Army reservists did it in Tier 1A Abu Ghraib.
That might be a little bit of a stretch. If we were killing other students, that might be a valid judgment.
Zimbardo acted as witness for the defense.
You testified in the court-martial in the Abu Ghraib scandal.
Yes, I did. I was part of the defense team.
Coming to the defense of Chip Frederick, what that gave me the opportunity to say, were these bad apples or were these good American soldiers put in a bad barrel? Before Chip Frederick went down in that dungeon, Abu Ghraib, he was as normal, healthy as the good guards in my study. And within several weeks, he was as bad as the worst ones.
At Abu Ghraib, politically, he's saying, look, it's not the individual, it's the institution.
Does it excuse any bad behavior you may have done? You know, beyond my control, you know, I was following orders.
Now, we had this narrative, the scenes of sort of homoerotic humiliation that went on in the SPE are so much like those pictures that we saw of the prisoners in Abu Ghraib.
Zimbardo started talking about sexual abuse in the Stanford Prison Experiment right after the Abu Ghraib scandal.
Our guards were forcing the prisoners to engage in simulated sodomy, exactly as in this prison.
He's pretending that guards made some prisoners play sexual games in the Stanford Prison Experiment.
What's big like a dog? Why don't you play each ball?
Zimbardo exaggerated these games because it was very useful to match the Stanford Prison Experiment with the Abu Ghraib scandal. But we know that's not what happened.
Abu Ghraib revived interest in the experiment, and Zimbardo saw the opportunity for a book.
Stanford University psychologist Philip Zimbardo.
It's called the Lucifer Effect.
The book is the Lucifer Effect.
Now, when you say the slow descent of man from good to evil, it took a week, did it not?
No, it actually took 36 hours.
Without Dr. Zimbardo continually pressing his case, the Stanford prison experiment would have lapsed into the haze where most previous social psychology experiments exist. It takes continuous pumping to keep the bicycle going.
When I started doing research on the experiment, I'd never thought about debunking it. Zimbardo was a reputed Stanford professor who did it, and nobody debunked the experiment in 50 years, so I thought, okay, it's not me, this French guy from nowhere who's going to debunk this. When I went through the archive, I had no idea that the official narrative was not what really happened. But when you do science, you have a commitment to the truth, and you cannot let something false circulate like this. Maybe I'm a bit old-fashioned, but for me, it's a duty to make things right. I decided to write a book and to get in touch with the participants.
I got a call from Thibault.
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 Oh, Thibault.
Thibault. He's very bold. He wrote a book that was very damning in picking apart the experiment and the methodology. And I think as a result of his book, other researchers are looking at the experiment with a more skeptical eye.
I noticed, John, that sometimes you close your eyes when you speak. Is that something that you do often?
If it's normal conversation, no. If it's thoughtful, yeah.
I'm a social psychologist at the University of St Andrews, and I have been studying human social behaviour, in particular group and collective processes, for more years than I would like to remember. Around 1999, the BBC came to us and it said, we now have the technology, which we didn't have before, to observe behaviour systematically. We want to use that to revisit the Stanford Prison Study. So we took the same basic setup.
15 men randomly divided into two groups, one group of men given power over the other.
We thought that the guards would impose their authority, and we were rather surprised to find that didn't happen at all. They hated being guards.
I don't want to be a guard, to be honest, really. I'd rather be a prisoner, really, in all honesty.
We began to realise that actually leadership was absolutely critical. Because the more you look at Zimbardo's study, you realise that the guards didn't just become guards willy-nilly. He acted as leader to tell them what to do. But without leadership, you don't get the types of toxic behaviour we saw in Zimbardo's SPE and we don't see in our study.
How'd we let ourselves get duped like this? No, 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 no. Childish leaders who cannot lead. Wealthy plutocrats consumed by greed. Hate groups growing.
When I went to college, I wanted to stay in the arts and theater, and I ended up at a place down in Southern California called Chapman University. Had a very good music department. I love my music, and I create things. I write plays, I direct them. I'm a very non-violent guy. I can't even be mean to my cats. And I think that comes from a lot from my father, who grew up almost Amish. He was extremely gentle and would never even show anger unless we really pushed him to the brink. And I think that's who I've become, is kind of more like my father. I'm mellow. People really need to learn the difference between a role somebody's playing and who they are. Because of the experiment, I still get hate mail from people. People that say, you sick, you sadistic bastard. I hope you rot in hell. And somebody going as far as to go on to like my business page and talk about how, they went to get a loan from me in my business and I ended up, torturing them or something like that. Come on, this is my business.
Dave, you've probably had one of the most notorious reputations. They called you John Wayne because they said you were brutal and you're sadistic.
It's been fascinating to see how the interest never seems to go away. Here we are, it's been 50 years, and I'm still talking about it. I get asked to come and give a lot of talks, do a lot of interviews.
What most people are surprised at is the level of humiliation that we tried to put the prisoners through. I started inventing my own daily humiliations.
When you give somebody the absolute power to control what other people are doing, then they're going to use that power.
I go talk to high school classes. Teacher will announce, well, we've been talking about the prison experiment, and I have one of the guards, coming in to talk to us, the guy that they would call John Wayne. And the students get, he's coming here. Oh my God, what do we do? It's like, is he going to torture us? So I think they're always surprised to find that, I'm a pretty easygoing guy. It bothers me that they don't take the time to look beyond what, the very surface. And that's one of the problems, of course, I think, with the way the experiment has been perceived and has been disseminated in popular culture by Zimbardo.
Dr. Philip Zimbardo is professor of psychology at Stanford University and several years ago engaged in a fascinating experiment wherein he chose middle-class students, put them all in a group. How many?
Well, there are a dozen guards and 10 prisoners.
Okay.
50 years later, the experiment should be irrelevant, but I'm still pissed at Phil.
What happened that's not in the film is that within 36 hours, the first prisoner had what could be called an emotional breakdown.
It wasn't the experiment that pissed me off.
It's a stupid experiment. There was a bunch of obvious manipulation of us.
But then he kept calling after that to get me on all these TV shows.
Now take your bed and your clothes in prison!
It was so many things.
You were a prisoner. Okay. That was you just yelling?
Year after year, he's re-traumatizing you. Didn't like that I had to work so hard to get him to back off.
I was wondering how the prisoners' attitudes towards each other changed during this experiment.
I was only in the experiment a day and a half or 2 days. I got out quick.
I don't want to talk to that guy. I don't want to deal with it. And I had to. He would come at me this way and that way, and he was articulate, and he's well-published, and he's going to give me work.
I think that we are vulnerable to the con men. We are vulnerable to influence.
The control of the narrative has been Phil's.
He can't help that. He's just a narcissistic. That's Phil.
Professor Zimbardo was kind of a clown.
I think the traditional narrative of the SPE needs to be challenged.
Anybody to try to reduce human behavior to such simple notions is fraud.
Fraud.
Kind of fraudulent.
And that's what Zimbardo did.
So I'm looking at the camera. The last year, the Stanford Prison Study has received lots of criticism. The Stanford Prison Experiment is a lie. Zimbardo is a fraud. And none of their criticisms hold up. Zero.
See no evil. Hear no evil.
I am Chuck.
I'm Doug.
Gentlemen, good morning. Morning. I'm Dave. There's the man. Do you? You are? I'm Jerry Shue, 5486. Okay.
Hi, Dave.
Dave, how are you, Clay?
Hi, I'm Clay.
Clay, Carl.
Isn't this incredible?